Is there anyone having a better week than the UConn Huskies? You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A little housekeeping. My YouTube support has been amazing. I'd love to have all of my subscribers download the audio version as well, wherever you get your podcasts. It's equally as important for helping this channel and the Locked On UConn audience grow. So if you can do me two quick favors. First, click that little subscribe button. It means everything to me. And when you're done with this, head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, hit that follow button. This way you'll never miss a moment of Locked On UConn. And lately, you don't want to miss any moments with all that's going on with Dan Hurley. And we'll talk more about him today as well. Can't tell you how much that support means to me. Also, if you're an audio podcast listener, give us a 5-star review. Good reviews trigger those referrals for similar shows where we can get some new audience members who are interested in more UConn content. And a special shout out to my everydayers. Thanks for diving into this new UConn content and spreading the love for UConn hoops. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We welcome in basketball insider and contributor to such publications as the New York Times and Forbes Sports, as well as NG.com, along with his own website, zagsblog.com, Adam Zagoria. Adam, it's been quite the time for UConn this week. But in all seriousness, even with the Celtics up 2-0 in the finals, the Panthers up 2-0 in the Stanley Cup finals, and even with Carlos Alcaraz winning his first French Open, is there a team or a person having a better week than Dan Hurley and his UConn Huskies?
Yeah, it's certainly been the biggest story in sports, Mark, for the last week or so. You got two of the premier brands in basketball, right? The LA Lakers and the Connecticut Huskies, both involved for, one coach whose name is Hurley, whose father is a Hall of Famer. He's coming off back-to-back championships. And obviously this ends well for UConn. They get to keep their future Hall of Fame coach. They can go for a three-peat. And now he's back out on the recruiting trail, this week. And the Lakers are still looking for a coach and kind of looking a little bit in disarray.
Yeah, for sure. You know the Hurleys. You're from the area. Did something about the dynamic of the Lakers and the franchise as it's currently constituted, not the brand, feel a little off when it came to? I know this was a real possibility. So the question is, did you really think that it was truly 50-50 where he could potentially leave? Or did you always kind of feel like he was going to go back to UConn? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, when Woj first reported it last week, I was surprised because obviously before that, Shams and others had been reporting JJ Redick. And, we went from one guy who's never coached at any level before to the guy who's arguably the greatest, coach in college basketball right now. So that seemed a little surprising. From what I understand, the Lakers had been interested in Dan for some time, but had kind of, it had kept it in-house. Maybe only a few people knew, Rob Pelinka, Jeannie Buss, Danny, his agent, and then obviously eventually Woj. So there was some interest there. Obviously the JJ Redick being done to the Lakers thing was not accurate, even though, I talked to NBA people who thought it was and thought it was only a matter of time before JJ got announced. It's the Lakers. Obviously, Dan has made no secret that he has interest in the NBA. I wrote today that, I think him ending up with the Knicks would kind of be the ultimate fairy tale Hollywood ending. But, it's the Lakers. And once he got on a plane and goes out there with Andrea, then, anything can kind of happen, right? But my sort of gut feeling was, these are Jersey City, New Jersey, Northeast people. Dan has told us 1,000 times, he didn't want to get divorced because his wife
right.
barely wanted to move from Rhode Island to Connecticut, and obviously LA is a far cry from that. So my gut was sort of always like, is this really the right fit? And then you bring in, LeBron's going to be 40 in December. They're kind of an aging, not great team in a loaded Western Conference. I sort of think the Bronny thing is going to be a potential headache for who's ever the coach there. Like you have to draft or sign him. He's LeBron's son. How's that going to work out? But obviously for a few days there, it was up in the air. It was a real question. And then, when video surfaced of Danny, Andrea, and Luke at Billy Joel on Saturday night, I start texting coaches. And obviously I know a lot of the New Jersey high school guys and coaches who all have known Dan forever. And it's like, are you really about to take the Laker job and move to LA and move your whole family and hire a staff there, and you're out at Billy Joel on Saturday? Like that doesn't make sense to me. I think you'd be doing other things. So I kind of think Dan, strung this out maybe a little longer than was needed. Like yesterday was a little dramatic, and we had to wait till about 1:45. But I had people even over the weekend close to the team telling me he was coming back, and it didn't make sense that he was going to show up at a Connecticut practice at 1:00 on the UConn campus and say, "Hey, I'm going to the Lakers." That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, it became pretty apparent to those of us who are, locked into to UConn that he was going to stay, because as you mentioned, I couldn't imagine being a player on that team, going to practice, and then him saying, "Oh, by the way, I took the Lakers job." Yeah. And Luke Murray is taking over, Kamanian is taking over, and take your cues from him.
Right.
It's been fun, guys. I'll see on the flip side.
Yeah.
That felt a little weird, but you're right, man. I feel like the Billy Joel stuff made me laugh. It's like there's scouts everywhere, right? The first picture I saw was from far away, and zooming in and seeing Andrea and Dan and Luke, and then the Instagram stuff came out with Luke Murray. I think he deleted that too, because I think everybody in UConn Nation sent him a message like, "Hey, make sure you tell Dan to stay."
Yeah.
So
were they singing "Say Goodbye to Hollywood"? I didn't see them singing that. Somebody said that.
No, but I know that there are several people that joked around like that was the song being played, but that
would be a pretty awesome troll by Luke if that was the case.
Yeah, that would have been pretty cool. Well, we'll get into how this ripple effect affects. You mentioned Dan being on the recruiting trail, how that's going to affect recruiting going forward. Dan turning down the Lakers, reportedly turning down Kentucky, and how that all will kind of translate into UConn's future coming up.
I mean, just real quick, how about that? This guy has turned down Kentucky and the Lakers, maybe the two premier brands in their respective sports in the last couple months.
Oh, without a doubt. And you're going to be asked that same question coming up after this break. Yes, sir. Excuse me. Hey, everyone. If you're looking to snag NBA Finals tickets, you're going to love Game Time. With Game Time, you get tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices on Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip, so you can score killer deals last minute. Personally, I've been browsing the Game Time app, and it's fantastic. You have finals matchups and other high-profile events. Deals are found were incredible, and it's super easy to navigate. One of my favorite features is the panoramic seat views. Knowing exactly where my view will be and buy is a game changer. Plus, Game Time's last-minute tickets and flash deals can save you up to 60%. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's bring back Adam, yeah, you mentioned right before the break, we talked about the ripple effect in him turning down the two arguably the biggest brands in all of basketball, in the pros and in college. Tell me about what that will look like. You like you talked about, high school coaches, college coaches have been doing this for years. Nothing Dan Hurley and his staff does is by accident, right? So Do you think that they're formulating that pitch now, or did they have it in the bag to kind of talk to these recruits that, look, I know they're not going to look for super classes the way Duke does it or the way Kentucky did it with Calipari, but if they're going after a kid like AJ DeBonsa or Malik Thomas, those are the two names that have surfaced for UConn. Is that going to be part of the pitch, and how prevalent will that be?
Yeah, two things. I mean, first, I have to just say real quick, I respect the Kentucky fans. I get what they're all about, but I thought that was just arrogant on their part to think that, their initial top 3 list was like Dan Hurley, Billy Donovan, and Nate Oates. And they were like, we're not even going to consider, any of these other people. And we're just going to throw $10 or $12 million at Dan Hurley, and he's going to come running down here from Connecticut to Lexington, Kentucky. And it's just like, some of these people just have no idea what the Hurleys are about, what Andrea's about, what Dan's about. That just wasn't going to happen. And, just really sort of misguided and arrogant by some of them. As far as the recruiting thing, yeah, I mean, I got a good quote from Fran Fraschilla yesterday. I put in my story that Danny will now be able to, tell any recruit, hey, I turned down LeBron and the Lakers and Kentucky and whoever to stay here and coach Alex Caravan and to coach AJ DeBonsa or coach whoever. Now, I'm not sure that's a nice thing to say. It's sexy. It's kind of the rough equivalent of Calipari talking about, hey, I've got $1 billion worth of contracts in the NBA and look at all the guys I've got in the NBA. But, do you really need – the guys won back-to-back NCAA championships at this point, 12 straight games by double digits or whatever. They're going for a three-peat. I'm not sure he really needs any other, bona fides or pickup lines or whatever in recruiting to get players. So I think he's in good shape. He's going to be – look, the only guy who's got as many rings in college basketball right now as Dan Hurley is Bill Self. I saw Rick Pitino win 2 championships, so we all know Rick won 2. He's only got credit for 1. But, that's 3 guys. So Dan has twice as many championships at this point as John Calipari, Jim Boeheim, Tom Izzo, Scott Drew, Tony Bennett. And let's say they lose in the second or third round of the Sweet 16 next year. There'll be a little bit of sort of bloom off the rose, but for the next 5 years, Dan's going to be able to walk around going 2 rings, and everyone's going to know that. And so that, that should help them with everything, television, recruiting, money for his assistants, NIL money, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I can tell you what it's definitely done is I've seen a flurry of activity of there's an app that you can have on your phone, Store Central. It's where all the money goes to the NIL recruiting, and there's been tons of activity, more subscribers. It's only $100 to join for a year, so there's they're adding people every day, multiple. So I know that the UConn fans, because of this, are kind of showing out for that, and they're donating and being part of that NIL collective. So that's going to help as well. I had another question for you in terms of impact for the current team. We talked about this team being loaded from a talent perspective. At least I have for the last 3-4 weeks pre the Dan Hurley circus, right? This team can be very, very good. There's a lot of talent from top to bottom. What does it do? Is this the biggest shot in the arm for a team that they're going to have Dan Hurley back going into this season and going for that three-peat?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, look, I think they're going to be really good, and they have a legitimate shot to contend for a three-peat, and that's really all you can ask for. Are there going to be a lot of other, really good older teams this year? Yes. Kansas, North Carolina, your usual suspects. Duke is going to be fascinating with Cooper Flagg and their whole guys. And I think losing, you lose a guy like Donovan Clingan, who was just so dominant and just such a monster in the NCAA tournament, 7'2", nobody really had an answer for him. And then you lose these guards, Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton, Steph Castle, talking about maybe 3 NBA guys right there. But, they bring back some good players. Alex Caravan, Hassan Diarra, Samson Johnson's going to have a much bigger role. Liam McNeely, it'll be really interesting to see how he and Aiden Mahaney kind of fill into the sort of, Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton type of roles. But yeah, you got to think these guys are thinking, hey, this guy came back for us. He believes in us. Dan always talks about he wants it to be like a cult in a good way, where everyone, I've never heard of a cult in a good way, but, unless I'm at a Dead show or a Rolling Stone show or something. But yeah, these guys are going to be thinking this guy came back to coach us and he believes in us. And, I'm not sure how you quantify and measure that, hey, we're more motivated than we were before to three-peat. But, that can do nothing but be a boost for the current team.
Yeah, I think the mantra for me is going to be something to the effect of, and I'm sure the leaders on the team, the Alex Caravans, the Hassan Diarras, Samson, the guys who have been there and won titles in a contribution factor, to kind of say, listen, we need to make sure that we're stepping up every day in practice, because coach literally went to LA, told them no, and now he's back with us. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, because I don't think Dan's going to have to say it too many times. I think the players, because I think this is fascinating. Most players at this age that these guys are, in their teens, early 20s, think that LeBron James is the greatest of all time. To me, that is subjective based off of eras, right? Most of these guys think LeBron is the best player to ever suit him up. So for your head coach to say no to that, into the type of money that was being thrown around, I think it's a pretty big shot in the arm. My next question
it's
too
also,
is,
I just want to throw in, I don't know where you're going,
please.
But it's also a big shot in the arm for the Big East Conference. And
fantastic point.
And for college basketball in general.
Absolutely.
I talked a little bit to Rick Pitino yesterday. He put out some tweets. Look, this Rick Pitino, Dan Hurley rivalry thing, how much of it is real and how much of it is fake, I think it's pretty real, is terrific for the Big East and for college basketball. You got guys who genuinely don't seem to like each other. Danny's the new kid on the block. He's got 2 rings. Rick wants to knock him off. And, St. John's is going to be good. They got Kadari, Richmond coming over from Seton Hall. So if Dan had left, here on talk radio in New York City, they're stretching it a little too much, saying maybe St. John's could have knocked off UConn, won the Big East. We'll see about that. But UConn with Kamani Young as the head coach is not the same as UConn with Dan Hurley as the head coach. And it's just, it's just great for the league. And, Fox is going to show UConn in all kinds of primetime games, and they're going to hype up, Danny versus Rick and all these other great coaches in the league. And it's just, he's pretty much the face of college basketball at this point, I would think, along with guys like, Bill Self and John Calipari and a few others.
No, it's fantastic. It's a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up. You mentioned his name. If in a hypothetical world, if Dan did choose the Lakers, do you think Kamani Young would have been the interim head coach?
I know Seth Greenberg, who I have a lot of respect for, who is close with Dan and talks to Dan, said that on ESPN, and someone else who I trust told me yesterday that Kamani was told he would get the job if Danny left. It's certainly a great question for Dan on Thursday at the press conference. I think it makes the most sense, either Kamani or Luke.
Right.
Had Danny left, you got to keep it in-house. You got to keep the roster intact, because don't forget, these guys could have all entered the portal and had 30 days to get out of there. It would have been a free-for-all. Dan repeatedly says that both Kamani and Luke are future head coaches in waiting, and their time is going to come.
For sure. Before we get to the next segment, I'm not speaking directly to you, Adam, but are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories and without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, streaming 24/7 on YouTube from a free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to play Who Do You Want with Adam coming up after this. All right, Adam. This is a fun game I've been playing with every one of my guests when we have a last segment here. It's who do you want? And inspired by, I just bought a minivan for my family, and we're traveling this weekend up towards your neck of the woods. As we talked pre-show, you can pick 4 people max because we're talking basketball players or basketball coaches. In all the time you've covered basketball, make it UConn centric. Who would you pick to? You're driving. You got 4 people. You got someone in shotgun and 3 people behind you in a minivan. Who do you want to go on a road trip with in UConn history all time? Coaches, players.
Well, I mean, I had to say, like, Danny and Luke would probably be up there. I mean,
Okay.
I like both those guys. I've spent a lot of time with them. You know, I may be the only guy covering Dan now who also covered him at St. Benedict's Prep in high school. You know, I can remember going over to St. Benedict's and writing stories on his teams and him when he was there. You know, he's obviously a interesting guy. He's got some similar music tastes. He
Sure.
told me he wanted to go see Pearl Jam, and then he went to see Billy Joel. He's shown he can throw the Frisbee. So, you know, we got to stop on the side of the road on this road trip and get out and toss the disc. Luke Murray, really interesting guy. Love talking to him. A lot of great stories. So he'd be in there. Can I put Ray Allen in this vehicle? Seems like the vibe would be pretty interesting. But I have interviewed Ray a few times now after UConn has won their championships. You know, very thoughtful, smart, interesting guy who's obviously got a lot of pride in Connecticut and talks about how there's nothing to do in stores except play basketball and go to school as opposed to some other schools. So, and he's obviously become a big supporter of Dan and the current team. And then I'll say Diana Taurasi, just because I'm sure she'd be really interesting and smart and fun. I've interviewed her back in the day. Hopefully all these guys can throw the disc and, you know, we could stop in a park on the side of the road and crank up some tunes and throw the Frisbee around.
I love it, man. A couple more. I know you're a tennis guy. So, and as you know, so am I. So you have to pick a partner who you're playing a tournament. Who do you think in UConn history, maybe with a little training, can play up to par with you and would be suitable for a tournament?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the tennis backgrounds on any of these guys. Something tells me Alex Caravan would be pretty good athlete. Sure. I'm going to say Alex Caravan. You know, it's hard to turn down a 7'2" guy at the net and serving.
Sure.
So I'm going to take Donovan Clingan there. You know, I think the ideal height for a tennis player is really kind of like 6'1" to 6'3". Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, all about that height. Once you get up to 6'10", you're, you know, Ivo Karlovic and
John Isner
height. You know, it's almost a little too big. But I think that Donovan, if he gets a serve motion down, should be able to just serve down and crank out some aces.
It's so funny that you're definitely a tennis guy that you bring up Ivo Karlovic. I played Ivo Karlovic in 2003 in a tournament in Ojai, California, and he beat me 6'2", 6'2". Probably the funniest.
You played pro tennis?
Yep.
Wow.
So
I did not know that.
Yeah, when he retired this year, there was a funny video of him playing against a guy like my height. I'm probably 5'11", maybe 6 foot with shoes, but the height disparity between him and a player that they showed was I didn't think to stand on a chair to shake his hand, but that's what they showed the video of. So it's just so funny you mentioned him.
Where did you play college tennis? UConn or?
I enrolled at UConn. The coach left, and then I entered the portal before the portal was a thing, and I got snagged up by Sacred Heart University, also in the Northeast. So played up there. Yep.
We were destined to meet then.
Absolutely. All right. So now the 2 more quick questions. I've been roped into pickleball now. I'm getting older. People are asking me to play a lot. I played last night. Who do you think you'd pick as a pickleball guy? Have you ever played?
I have played once now with some friends. I get how it's addictive. It's a lot of quick reactions. You got to have the
Sure.
hand-eye coordination. I still think it's, it's obviously not as athletic as tennis.
Sure.
And it's for a lot of older people who can't hack it in tennis. But I get that it's addictive and a lot of fun. I'll say Alex Caravan again. I just have a gut feeling about Alex.
I agree with that.
That he's going to come through for me. I also think Cam Spencer, just because he's super competitive and wants to win and got great hand-eye coordination. I don't know anything about their racket sports skills, but I'm going to go with Alex and Cam there.
Cam has been Cam has been a popular one because he's a lacrosse guy. Lacrosse guys usually can handle anything with their hands, whether it's a hockey stick, a tennis racket, a baseball. So that's been a popular one.
Yeah, I mean, you probably can't go wrong picking like a Ray Allen or somebody like that because they're just so skilled.
I had a Hartford comedian on a couple days ago, and he said he would have picked Khalid El-Amin because of the only time he played. He said he feels like Khalid would have been perfect because he's the kind of sneaky quick and all that stuff. I thought that was a good answer as well.
I have to say what I don't like about pickleball. I like to serve and volley in tennis. I like to come to the net. I'm pretty much always at the net, and you cannot serve and volley in pickleball. You have to let the ball bounce. You can't hit it out of the air. Can't be in the kitchen. So I'm a big Johnny Mac guy. And when he played pickleball in that pickleball slam on ESPN with the Agassiz and Steffi Graf, he kept getting foot faulted for coming into the kitchen. So it's a mental adjustment for me.
Absolutely. Last question for you, and before we go. If you had to pick one player or coach in UConn history to be your security guard, you're walking down New York City, you need security. Who's guarding you?
That is again, it's tough to not pick Donovan Clingan, right? I mean, the guy's 7'2". I grew up, my best friend was 6'10", and nobody really, people always asked him, how's the air up there? But,
sure.
You generally don't mess around with people that size. So
absolutely.
I'll take Donovan and his dad.
For sure.
Well,
I appreciate you, man. Last thing for me before I let you go. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you, covering all the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Adam, thanks so much. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Adam Zagoria, I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.